Every time you turn on the news, it feels like the world economy is one bad headline away from straight up imploding. Stock markets tumble, inflation spikes, banks wobble, governments print money like it's monopoly, and your wallet gets thinner while billionaires somehow keep buying super yachts the size of football fields. It's like watching a building on fire while the firefighters are inside roasting marshmallows. Politicians swear everything's under control. Central banks talk about soft landings, and experts throw around phrases like transitory inflation, which is economists speak for "we have no idea, but please don't panic yet." Meanwhile, groceries cost more, rent feels like extortion, and your paycheck buys less every month. You don't need a PhD in economics to feel the collapse in your daily life. The wild part, it's not one single disaster, it's a cocktail of problems: broken supply chains, money printing hangovers, debt mountains, corporate greed, and geopolitics. Stir them all together, and voila, a global economy that feels like it's running on duct tape and vibes. So today, let's break down why the global economy feels like it's collapsing. Not with boring charts or economist jargon, but with sarcasm, examples, and the uncomfortable truth. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly how it was built, and that's the problem. Let's start with the obvious villain: inflation. That silent thief that raids your wallet while smiling politely. Prices are rising everywhere, and it's not just in your head. Your weekly grocery run really is starting to look like a luxury shopping spree. Eggs, rent, fuel, even the cheap fast food combo meal now costs more than a sit-down dinner used to. Inflation isn't just numbers in a government report. It's the daily gut punch you feel every time you tap your card and wonder if it's broken because the total looks wrong. Here's the scam. Central banks and politicians act like inflation is some mysterious force of nature, like hurricanes or earthquakes. Oh no, inflation hit us again. Who could have predicted? Spoiler, they caused it. Years of printing money like it was toilet paper, near-zero interest rates, and government spending like drunk sailors guaranteed this outcome. Then a pandemic came along, supply chains broke, and suddenly everyone acted shocked that flooding the system with cash while goods were scarce made prices explode. It's not rocket science, it's Econ 101 with extra stupidity. And the excuses are hilarious. First, they told us inflation was transitory. Translation: relax, peasants, it'll go away on its own. It didn't. Then they said, well, it's a sign of strong demand. Sure, buddy, I'm so glad my rent doubling means the economy is healthy. The reality is, inflation is less about you buying too much, and more about companies realizing they can hike prices and blame global conditions. Corporate profits are hitting records while consumers are drowning. Funny how that works. The psychological toll is brutal. When prices rise faster than paychecks, people panic. They cut savings, delay retirement, swipe credit cards more, and fall deeper into debt. Inflation isn't just about math, it's about despair. It makes you feel like no matter how hard you work, you're falling behind. And when enough people feel that, society simmers, protests break out, politicians get booted, entire governments collapse. Inflation isn't just a thief, it's a political time bomb. And here's the kicker: inflation doesn't hit everyone equally. The wealthy complain about their portfolios dipping, but they still own assets that grow with inflation. Stocks, real estate, businesses. The poor and middle class, they own paychecks, and paychecks don't rise nearly as fast as prices. That's why inflation feels like collapse. It widens the gap, squeezing the many while the few ride the wave. So yes, inflation is real. Yes, it's everywhere. And no, it's not going away just because Jerome Powell mumbles the word resilient into a microphone. Until the system stops being addicted to cheap money and corporations stop milking crises for record profits, your wallet will keep getting mugged in broad daylight. That's why the economy feels broken, because for most people, it is. If inflation is the fire, debt is the gasoline we've been pouring on it for decades. The entire global economy is basically one giant IOU: governments, corporations, households. Everyone is swimming in borrowed money. Actually, scratch that. We're not swimming. We're drowning while holding bricks labeled interest payments. Let's start with governments. Every politician campaigns like Santa Claus and governs like a spoiled teenager with dad's credit card. Free healthcare, free education, bombs for everyone. How do they pay for it? Debt, endless piles of it. The US alone carries over $34 trillion in debt, a number so big it's meaningless. Try picturing 34 trillion cheeseburgers. You can't. That's the point. The number is so absurd, it stops feeling real. But the interest payments? Oh, those are very real. Governments are now spending more on debt service than on things like infrastructure or defense. Imagine maxing out your credit cards and then paying more in interest than rent. That's the reality for nations. Corporations aren't better. For years, they binged on cheap money. When interest rates were near zero, they refinanced, borrowed more, bought back their own stock, and called it creating shareholder value. Translation: we borrowed money to make our stock price go up so executives could cash their bonuses. Now rates are higher, and surprise, they're choking on the debt. Entire industries, from real estate developers in China to tech startups in Silicon Valley, are teetering because they built empires on cheap credit that no longer exists. And then there's households, regular people. Credit card balances are at record highs. Student loans look like life sentences. Mortgages are stretching 30, even 40 years in some countries. People aren't buying homes anymore. They're renting them from the bank for half their lives. And the kicker, wages haven't kept up. So families borrow more just to maintain the illusion of a middle-class lifestyle. 2 SUVs, a suburban home, vacations once a year, all financed with debt that will outlive them. It's not prosperity, it's cosplay prosperity, funded by lenders. The math is brutal. Debt only works if growth outpaces interest, but growth is slowing, and interest is climbing. That's like running on a treadmill that's speeding up while you're getting more tired. Eventually, you faceplant. And when one part of the system faceplants, a government default, a major corporate bankruptcy, a household debt crisis, the shockwaves ripple everywhere. What makes it worse is how normalized debt has become. We don't even blink when governments raise the debt ceiling again. We don't panic when corporations borrow billions for stock buybacks. We don't question why 22-year-olds are starting adult life with 6 figures in student debt. It's just the way things are. But behind the normalization is fragility. Because debt works until it doesn't. And when the domino falls, the mountain comes crashing down. That's why the global economy feels like it's collapsing, because it's balanced on a Jenga tower of IOUs. One wrong move, a war, a banking crisis, a rate hike too far, and the whole thing topples. And unlike a Jenga game, nobody laughs when it hits the floor. Remember when the global economy felt like a well-oiled machine? You'd order something online, and 2 days later, it magically appeared at your door. Nobody thought about the invisible ballet of ships, trucks, factories, and warehouses that made it happen. Then 2020 hit, and suddenly we all discovered that the world runs on a supply chain held together with duct tape, prayer, and questionable labor laws. Supply chains are the veins of the global economy, moving everything from microchips to toilet paper, and when those veins clog, the whole body seizes up. A single factory shutdown in Asia means car dealerships in the US have empty lots. A shipping container stuck sideways in the Suez Canal delays billions in goods and somehow makes the price of coffee in Brazil creep upward. The world is so interconnected that a butterfly flaps its wings in China, and 6 weeks later, you're paying more for sneakers in Chicago. The pandemic exposed just how fragile this system really is. Factories closed, ports jammed, ships floated offshore for weeks. Suddenly, the just-in-time model, where companies minimize inventory to save costs, backfired spectacularly. It turns out that just-in-time really means just one hiccup away from total collapse. And hiccups keep coming. Natural disasters, trade wars, sanctions, labor strikes. The global economy has turned into a game of whack-a-mole, where every time one supply chain problem gets fixed, 3 more pop up somewhere else. Then there's geopolitics. The US and China are locked in an economic staring contest, and the fallout is brutal. Tariffs, export bans, and sanctions ripple across industries. A chip shortage here, an energy crisis there, ad wars, in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and suddenly global trade routes look less like stable highways and more like crime scenes. And because energy and food are the backbone of everything, disruptions mean your gas tank and grocery cart become political hostages. Even when things seem fixed, the scars remain. Companies are reshoring production, building redundancy, diversifying suppliers, all fancy ways of saying this is going to cost more. And who pays for it? Not the CEOs, not the shareholders. You do. Higher prices baked permanently into the system. The psychological impact is huge. We all grew up believing globalization meant stability, abundance, and cheap goods forever. Now, every empty shelf at Walmart, every delayed Amazon package, every price spike reminds us that stability was an illusion. The machine wasn't sturdy. It was fragile, one broken link in the chain, and the whole system shakes. That's why the economy feels like it's collapsing. It's not just that things cost more. It's the realization that the world is one traffic jam, one war, one virus away from chaos. And when the basics, food, energy, medicine depend on fragile chains stretching across oceans, collapse doesn't just feel possible, it feels inevitable. If inflation and debt are the diseases, corporate greed is the parasite feeding off both. Because let's be honest, not every price hike is because of supply chains or global crises. Sometimes it's just corporations looking at chaos and saying, perfect, let's charge more and blame it on the economy, and people buy it. Literally. During the pandemic, costs went up for businesses, sure, but profits? They went up even faster. Energy giants posted record profits while ordinary people had to choose between heating their homes or eating dinner. Food companies hiked prices while quietly telling shareholders, we've got room for margin expansion. Translation, we raised prices because we could, not because we had to. That's not survival, that's exploitation. The result? The wealth gap widened into a canyon. Billionaires doubled their fortunes while millions of people slipped into poverty. The top 1% owns more than half the world's wealth, and it's not because they're working harder. It's because the system rewards ownership, not labor. Assets grow, wages stagnate, and every crisis becomes an excuse to redistribute wealth upward. Stock buybacks soar while workers beg for a living wage. And when governments finally raise minimum wages, corporations whine about affording it, right after announcing executive bonuses bigger than entire payrolls. And it's not just about money. Corporate power bleeds into politics. Lobbyists write the rules. Tax codes are filled with carve-outs designed by the very companies they supposedly regulate. Governments bail out corporations when they fail, but tell citizens to tighten belts when rent skyrockets. It's socialism for the rich, capitalism for everyone else. No wonder the economy feels broken, because the rules were written by the players winning the game. This greed erodes trust. People see CEOs cashing $100 million paychecks while employees line up at food banks. They see luxury brands selling handbags that cost more than a year's rent, while middle-class families can't afford groceries. It creates a simmering resentment that bubbles over into strikes, protests, and populist politics. When people feel the system is rigged, and it is, they stop playing by the rules. Here's the kicker. Corporate greed isn't even subtle anymore. It's openly celebrated. Executives brag on earnings calls about pricing power, which is code for we're gouging you and you can't stop us. Stock markets cheer when companies fire thousands of workers to cut costs. The economy grows while households shrink. GDP goes up, but so does despair. That's why the global economy feels like it's collapsing, because for most people it is. Not in abstract numbers, but in lived reality. You don't care that the S&P 500 is green when your rent is red overdue. You don't feel economic growth when your groceries cost double and your boss still says no to a raise. The collapse isn't just financial, it's moral. And once trust in the system collapses, the money part is just a matter of time. If supply chains are fragile and corporate greed is corrosive, geopolitics is the earthquake that rattles the whole foundation. Wars, sanctions, trade disputes, political instability, these aren't side quests. They're main storylines in the global collapse saga. And the worst part? They're not going away. Look at Ukraine. One invasion, and suddenly half of Europe is scrambling for energy, wheat prices spike worldwide, and millions face food insecurity. Or the Middle East, one conflict there, and oil markets panic like toddlers in a thunderstorm. The global economy is so dependent on peace that a single missile can make your gas station raise prices overnight, and politicians act shocked every time, like we don't live in a world where wars have been happening for, oh I don't know, forever. Then there's the US versus China economic cage match. Tariffs, sanctions, tech bans, each move ricochets through global markets. One country restricts chip exports, and suddenly car prices in another country jump. Companies can't even plan 5 years ahead because they don't know if tomorrow's supply chain will get nuked by a political tantrum. Add in the constant threat of Taiwan tensions, and investors wake up every day with ulcers. Geopolitics feeds uncertainty, and uncertainty kills economies. Markets crave stability. Boring is profitable. But boring is gone. Now it's constant headlines of X threatens Y, sanctions imposed, trade deal collapses. You can't build long-term wealth in a world where tomorrow's rules depend on who shook hands or slapped sanctions today. It's economic roulette with global leaders as the dealers. And spoiler, they're drunk. And fear itself? That's gasoline on the fire. Even when nothing big happens, the fear that something might happen makes markets panic. Investors pull money, businesses cut back, consumers tighten wallets. The economy contracts not because of actual bombs, but because of the expectation of bombs. That's why it feels like collapse is always just around the corner, because perception alone is enough to trigger it. So yes, geopolitics matters. It matters because in a hyper-connected world, one border dispute can raise your grocery bill, and one election in a far-off country can tank your retirement account. Stability is a myth, fear is currency, and the only certainty left is uncertainty itself. So why does the global economy feel like it's collapsing? Because for the average person, it already has. Inflation chews through paychecks, debt mountains grow taller, supply chains snap, Corporations gorge themselves while wages starve. Politicians fight wars with your grocery money. It's not one disaster, it's all of them, stacked together like a Jenga tower, shaking violently every time another headline drops. And here's the part nobody likes to admit: the system isn't broken, it's functioning exactly as designed. Designed to protect wealth, not people. Designed to reward corporations, not workers. Designed to absorb shocks for the elites while transferring the pain downward. That's why billionaires get richer in crises while you wonder if you can afford eggs. It's not collapse for them, it's opportunity. But for you, it's exhaustion. Every price hike feels like betrayal. Every bill feels heavier. Every news alert is another reminder that your financial security is hostage to forces you can't control. And that helplessness, that constant feeling of being squeezed, is collapse. Not dramatic explosions, but a slow grinding down of hope. Yet here's the twist: awareness is power. Seeing the game clearly is the first step to playing it differently. You can't stop inflation single-handedly, but you can armor yourself against it. You can't erase debt mountains, but you can choose not to build your own. You can't control geopolitics, but you can control how much fear dictates your financial choices. Small actions, boring habits, relentless discipline. That's how ordinary people claw their way out of a system designed to crush them. So here's my challenge: stop doom scrolling and start doing. Audit your habits, protect your money, invest in yourself, and drop a comment. Which part of this collapsing circus hits you hardest? The inflation? The debt? The greed? Because the more we talk about it, the harder it is for those at the top to pretend everything's fine. The global economy may feel like it's collapsing, but your personal economy doesn't have to.